Greetings ladies and gentlemen, Melderon here. I hope that everyone watching this video is having a fine day. If you are not an avid viewer of this channel, you may not be aware that both myself and my brother Defcamp have been fortunate enough to gain access to the World of Warcraft Classic Beta. Because of that, I feel it's my duty to relate to you, the Classic WoW community, my experiences so far. I've played the beta for approximately 2 days playtime, and I've reached level 30 on a Shaman, my favorite class. At the time of making this video, level 30 is the max level a character can achieve on the beta. During that time, I've quested, grinded, ran a number of dungeons, interacted with some amazing people, leveled some professions, and even tried my hand at some PvP. Although in full transparency, PvP is not an aspect of the game I spend a lot of time in, so I will be filling that void with feedback from some close friends and associates. Also, since I do a considerable amount of shaman testing and theory crafting, I've come across a few bugs, or should I say, what I think are bugs, and did my due diligence in reporting them. So after experiencing all of this, I'd like to give my honest impressions to you, the community, of how my experience have been thus far on my journey to level 30. But before I do, I'd like to briefly discuss the phenomenon we humans call memory. To be completely frank with you all, I don't remember my vanilla days very well. Sure, I remember the first time I rode a mount and some funny and epic moments here and there, but we are talking about events that transpired approximately 14 years ago. Honestly, I don't even remember where I was working or living 14 years ago off the bat, let alone spell coefficients, pathing, and tooltips in vanilla WoW. On top of that, I was a horrible player back then, and didn't know how the game worked on a fundamental level. That inherently is the issue with making a video like this. I am not a special case here though. Regardless of how far you progressed in vanilla or how good of a player you were back then, memory is a funny thing. We tend to only remember certain details of the past and rely on logic or guesswork to fill the rest in. I'm saying this because I am inevitably going to say something that some of you will disagree with, regardless if I am right or wrong in my stance or opinion. All of our memories are incomplete to some extent. That being said, bear with me. What I can say with a certain level of confidence, however, is that I have accrued extensive experience, memory, and even some actual mathematical data from private servers over the past 4 years. Besides leveling a total of 5 characters to 60 across both factions, and doing a bit of max level content, both PvE and PvP, I've analyzed a number of game aspects like threat, spell coefficients, tactics, rotations, and more using a number of approaches. In other words, thanks to private servers, I know a lot more about the game now. Also, private servers to me are a better comparison, not just because they are fresher in my mind, but because the overall experience is more comparable. Constant DCs, horrible ping, low frame rates, and those square 4x3 monitors are a thing of the past. Because of this, a lot of comparisons I'm going to make in this video will be to what I know and what I'm comfortable talking about, my private server experience. That being said, if you've never played on private servers, I deeply believe you can still get something from my perspective and get an excellent overall impression of the Classic WoW beta. Alright, let's now get into each aspect of the game. The leveling experience, for the lack of a better, more all-encompassing word, was wonderful. The world looks sharp, it looks clean, and the mechanics for the most part are extremely smooth and polished. I am not a fan of the updated graphics, but even without them, classic Azeroth has never looked better. I wouldn't go as far as say the world has been remastered or remade. Rather, the world itself seems to have had new life breathed into it. It has been given a clean bill of health and a new lease on life. But make no mistake, the world is vanilla at heart. Pulling more than one mob is still precarious. Mobs higher level than you will make you wish you'd never been born, and friendly passerbys abound, providing you with warm hellos and helpful buffs. Also, a welcome change from private servers is that rares, quest mobs, and quest items don't spawn in the same location over and over again. Items like Chen's empty keg in the Barrens and NPCs like Baron Longshore don't always respawn in the same location. This makes the world feel more alive and represents a level of polish that we can only get from Blizzard Entertainment. Another interesting change from private servers is that mobs have many more flavorful abilities that were totally unknown until now. Of course, familiar and perhaps annoying abilities private servers had are still there, but many mobs cast debuffs and spells that I have either never seen before or have entirely forgotten. This makes the experience fresh and new to even someone who's played a ton of vanilla over the past 4 years or so on popular private servers. The questing experience just feels right. For the most part, barring some buggy NPCs that are being fixed regularly, the quests all work exactly as you expect them to. Yes, even those escort quests. As I've stated, I only feel comfortable comparing the beta to private servers, and what I can say with confidence is that the questing experience as a whole is very comparable to that on private servers. From a shaman perspective, the total time required, the difficulty, the experience gains, the overall damage, both yours and the mobs, and mob armor values, all these aspects are at best only minutely different than the popular private servers. Sure, some people have accounted that armor values are higher for some mobs on private servers, while for other mobs they're higher on the beta, but things average out rather cleanly in the long run. This goes the same for drop rates. Some things are higher on private servers, and some things are higher on classic. It all averages out in the end. I would not in any way alter your leveling routes or plans for classic if you're used to experiences on private servers. Things are very much comparable. But again, finally, it was an absolute pleasure to level my shaman to 30. I loved it. I haven't done any outdoor elite areas yet, but I have definitely done my fair share of group questing out in the world to both expedite the leveling process and to meet new friends. Overall, the world group PvE experience has been wonderful, mostly because of the amazing people I have met along the way. Quest drops work as expected, and people seem to naturally group up in areas where there is heavy overlap. Now let's move on to dungeons. I had the experience of running Ragefire Chasm, Wailing Caverns twice, Black Fathom Deeps twice, Shadowfang Keep, Gnomeregan, and Razorfen Crawl. Visually and aesthetically, dungeons are extremely well implemented and scripted, and loot drops seem to be very comparable to private servers. As far as mob and boss mechanics are concerned, as we saw in the leveling process, there are some abilities and debuffs that came as a surprise. But for the most part, boss abilities are very much the same as they were pretty well documented over the years. Also, group etiquette has been outstanding. People talk, people laugh, and everyone has been following loot rules and rolling on items like chests and such. However, there is one major difference with dungeons in the classic beta and on popular private servers. To put it bluntly, dungeons are too easy. I know what many of you are going to say. Melderon, you've been playing this game day in and day out for 4 years, and the people who you're playing with are all streamers, theory crafters, vanilla veterans, and overall very likely knowledgeable players. That is a valid argument, but you have to also remember this. The people who I've been playing with on private servers over the years are also extremely knowledgeable and experienced and do this content over and over again on multiple private servers and on many characters and in many roles. Furthermore, many of the people I grouped with on the PvE beta server admitted they hadn't played for years or had never played on private servers. Regardless, we burned through each and every dungeon. There were no wipes, except once in Gnomeregan when someone strayed too close to additional mobs towards the end and pulled about 10 level 33 to 34 mobs. Furthermore, I healed most of these dungeons, with the exception of Gnomeregan and Razorfen Crawl, and never drank once in need of mana. That's right, I did not consume one beverage in the entirety of the 5 dungeon runs I personally healed, save one time to test the mechanic in Wailing Caverns, which I will cover shortly. This isn't because mana regeneration rates are higher in the beta. In fact, they are significantly lower in the beta compared to private servers by about 5 mana per 2 seconds, at least in Shaman. In all transparency, I did have some healing gear with Intellect and Spirit on, but no more than I would have had on private servers. In fact, probably less, since I didn't have a main to pass me down gear. Additionally, everyone in my party was the appropriate level range for the dungeon, and we did not out-level the mobs. Now I realize that these are early level dungeons, but as I've stated, I only feel comfortable comparing my beta experience to my private server experience, and what I can say without a shadow of a doubt in my mind when considering all other possible explanations. My conclusion is that elite mob damage is much lower on the beta compared to popular private servers. On private servers, in Wailing Caverns, and in Black Fathom Deeps, I regularly went through a stack of water in one dungeon run, and sometimes even more than that because I would go after 2 to 3 pulls. That just isn't happening on the beta. Now I totally understand that this is likely correct, and is vanilla-like considering Blizzard has the original data and no one else does. It is very likely that private servers just overtuned everything. However, the experience to me, as a private server veteran, is just too easy. The only challenge I experienced so far was in the end of Gnomeregan, where the average mob levels are around 33 to 34, and because of that level difference, the mobs both hit significantly harder and were more difficult to damage. In that scenario, things were rather challenging, as it should be. However, when fighting elite mobs at or near your level in dungeons, the experience is, in my opinion, just not threatening in any way. Now for the one time I did drink. On private servers, during the final boss encounter Wailing Caverns, Mutinous the Devourer, the Murloc, between waves of adds, you cannot drink and regen mana because you are kept in combat and the waves quickly overlap. These two factors make this encounter actually extremely difficult. However, on the classic beta, you can actually drink in between these waves, trivializing the encounter in my opinion. Collectively, 5-man dungeon difficulty is a real issue. For years, the private server community has feared that the retail community would scoff at classic PvE content for being too easy. If dungeons are even easier than we were expecting, that response may be even more significant and negatively affect the health and longevity of the game. Blizzard, if you are watching, I am not asking for changes. Changes to the game should be left up to the community at large, perhaps via a voting system like an old school RuneScape. However, I wanted to provide my honest feedback to the community and to the development team from someone who has healed considerably in vanilla dungeons. Now, I am more than aware that things could ramp up significantly on the journey from 30 to 60, and sincerely, I hope they do. Because currently, I think that players, both old and new, will easily breeze through the dungeon content as is. In full transparency, this is the aspect of the game that I experienced the least in the beta, and also what I've experienced the least during my private server time. However, I must say that I feel PvP as a whole in the beta is performing very well. Class abilities feel right, and roles are clearly established at level 30. Interestingly, I have never twinked before, but capping the beta at level 30 has really brought to my attention the lively and fresh meta of low-level competitive PvP. At max level, I feel that there are clear distinctions of what classes shine and what classes do not. However, at level 30, the playing field seems a bit more balanced and allows for classes like hunters, shaman, priests, and paladins to really shine. Warriors and mages don't seem as dangerous to me, likely because talents like Arcane Power and Mortal Strike aren't yet available. Even druids are able to hold their own. Of course, this could be due to many players not having the best gear, seriously handicapping classes like warriors and even warlocks to some extent. All in all, the PvP aspect just feels right. The only downside that I haven't personally experienced, but what I hear from many players, is that spell batching doesn't feel like it should. But I'm wondering if this is because batching windows on private servers are tighter, or because people really don't remember how spell batching actually felt in vanilla WoW. Again, all in all, the level 30 cap, coupled with an interesting meta due to the 21-point talent limit, create a refreshing and interesting PvP experience for most players I've conversed with. Despite looking and feeling like vanilla WoW, there are some differences between the two iterations of the game. Most of these changes are not world-changing. However, some changes, like layering, have definitely polarized the community. I'm happy to say that I did not experience any layering during my experience with the beta. This is likely due to the fact that I'm on a PvE server, which is significantly less populated than the PvP server. And before you all make fun of me, I'm playing on a PvE server because I don't want to get ganked while performing analyses. In all seriousness, there are some comparatively minor changes that I've noticed that either were likely not in vanilla, definitely were not in private servers, or both. For the sake of providing information, I will say that for the vast majority of these quality of life changes, I do not think they will significantly impact the game either positively or negatively, and that is likely why the team incorporated them. The raid frames from current World of Warcraft are available in the beta. I don't see this as a big deal because you don't have to use them in party systems. You can still use the original unit frames from vanilla. However, they will be used by default in raid settings. Moreover, many of us alter our frames utilizing add-ons anyway. For you purists out there, I would be heavily surprised if an add-on developer doesn't create an add-on to bring the old raid frames back. In addition, you can also move your cast bar and buff bar under your unit frame or the target unit frame without an add-on. This to me is a bit cleaner, as I always like smaller scale graphics on my UI. The mail system is different than on private servers. Just like in retail, you can mail multiple items in a single mail, but each item sent will require an additional 30 copper. So essentially, Blizz made multi-mail add-ons for vanilla irrelevant. However, surprisingly, currently in the beta, mail sent to your alts takes an hour instead of being instant. I honestly don't know if this was true in vanilla, but on private servers, mail sent from one of your characters to one of your other characters is instant. This is an interesting change that the classic team has implemented. In the video here, you will see me running towards a quest area in the Barrens. I went to invite the other shaman running next to me so we can group up for a quest, just to realize that he or she was already in a group. But I also noticed that I could request to join their group. Even more interesting is that this shaman was not the group leader, so my request was sent to the group leader and he or she approved it. This to me is a very logical system. You are still interacting with other players to get into a group while also expediting the grouping process. On private servers, I would have to attempt to invite the player, get informed that they are already in a group, whisper them to invite me only for the player to then inform me they weren't the group leader, ask the group leader to either invite me or pass lead, and then invite me. That's how it would happen on private servers. All of these steps are now able to be compressed into one easy step. I thought about this change for a very long time, and in the long run, I think that it will result as a net positive for the game as a whole. As in retail, you can request to be dropped off at the closest flight master. This will allow players to cut flights short if they make a mistake or need to head in a different direction. It is somewhat possible that this change could negatively affect World PvP, as players could possibly avoid flying into towns under siege by the opposing faction. However, I think that players that want to engage in World PvP will fly in regardless. I don't see this change having significant effects on the game at large. It was no surprise to me to see autoloot added to the game. Essentially, autoloot has always existed. You just had to hold the shift key to do it. I personally think this is one of the most minor quality of life changes implemented, and I was expecting to see this added into the game. Also, unlike retail, you can only loot one mob at a time as it was in vanilla. If you remember vanilla WoW at all, I'm sure you remember the huge full screen view of the settings window. Well, that has been replaced with the cleaner, smaller, and slightly transparent setting window from retail. Again, if this bothers you, I'm sure an add-on will be developed to bring the old one back. Also, colorblind mode is available, and there's no reason to argue that it shouldn't be incorporated into the game. If you have ever played on private servers, you will know that you cannot replace a bag in an inventory or bank slot unless that bag is empty. That functionality is not in Classic WoW Beta. If you get a bag upgrade, you can replace the old one without having to empty it first. To me, this is a welcome change. The same goes for items. Let's say your inventory is full and you have to turn in a quest. The quest item you are holding is taking up a spot, as will that quest reward that you will be receiving. Upon turning in the quest, the game will immediately swap these items without you having to create an open inventory slot. If bag dimensionality is important to you, you'll be happy to know that when you replace weapons and armor with another piece, they will go into the inventory slot they originally came from. Now, this isn't surprising, but if you are switching between a two-hander and a one-hander and shield, or a one-hander and offhand, you'll probably remember that in private servers that the offhand or the shield will go to the front of your inventory space. In the video, you will see that I replaced my staff with a one-hander and shield and then put the staff back on. Both the one-hander and the shield go back to their original inventory space. This will limit the chances of you vendoring an item by accident. By this point, everyone knows that there is a graphic toggle incorporated into the game. I am personally not a fan of this option at all, but I am just glad we don't have updated character models. If you enjoy the updated textures, frill densities, shadows, and water effects, more power to you. Now, I would like to go over some interesting differences that I've experienced between the beta and what transpires on private servers. This list is far from exhaustive, and I will likely add more if the level cap is increased on the beta. Some of these differences are surprising, while others make sense. Again, I don't know if these are bugs or actual differences, as I do not remember if these things transpired in vanilla. However, if you do remember, please let me know in the comments. That's right, if the priest ability Mindtooth is resisted, it will actually pull the mob. This does not occur on private servers, and therefore made things like Dire Maul tribute runs significantly easier. I like this difference, as I am all for increasing the difficulty of the game. This one was a bit hard for me to get used to. On private servers, innkeepers almost always provide goods in addition to allowing you to set your hearthstone. In most circumstances, there is a vendor very close to them, in the beta. However, in some inns, like in Splinter Tree Post and Ashenvale, there are no vendors in the inn. I briefly stated this in the leveling portion of the video, but some items which have super high drop rates on private servers, like Plane Shredder Beaks in the Barrens, have very low drop rates on the beta, while items with very low drop rates on private servers, like Zephyr Hooves, drop at a much higher rate on the beta. However, all in all, things definitely even out in the end. Not every beast is skinnable on the beta. On private servers, you can literally skin everything, except for maybe birds. However, on the beta, many beast NPCs, especially unique named NPCs like quest mobs, rares, and bosses, are not skinnable. Sometimes, whole groups of mobs aren't skinnable. Again, I don't know if this is a bug or correct. Weapon skill points accrue much slower on the beta compared to private servers. This is likely due to the equation being off on private servers significantly. Without intellect gear or buffs, you had better be patient because the process can get quite annoying. To combat this, try to regularly switch between weapon types or get some intellect via gear or buffs. Yes, even you warriors and rogues should consider doing this. Furthermore, if your weapon skill is low, you will do considerably less damage to mobs compared to private servers, so make sure you keep your skills up. The difference in level between you and a mob is much more significant on the beta compared to private servers in my opinion. This holds true for both directions, meaning that if you are fighting mobs lower level than you, you feel very strong. But on the other hand, mobs 3 levels higher than you are tougher compared to what I've experienced on private servers. This is actually a very good thing considering raid mobs and bosses are usually higher level than you when you are level 60. Of course, this holds very true when we consider bosses, which are technically level 63 mobs. This means that weapon skill is much more relevant, as we just stated in the previous point. This effect is even more potent when we consider the recent blue post from Blizzard that mobs 3 levels higher than you have a 14% chance to parry. In my opinion, mobs that are higher level than you should feel dangerous. I think that the beta shows that this will definitely hold true in Classic. A very strange thing that a lot of people have been noticing, especially those playing Shaman, is that some spells and abilities are scaling within ranks. It's very important that I make a distinction here. I'm not talking about new ranks, increasing the damage or potency of an ability. That is obvious and intended. Rather, I am talking about spells increasing in damage or effect as you level. On the screen, you will see a few examples of this in Shaman. However, there is evidence of this occurring in other classes as well. I am still compiling this data, but you can clearly see that Shaman weapon imbues are gaining slight increases to damage or bonuses with each new level you reach until the next rank. You can read it right on the tooltip. This either does not occur on private servers, or if it does, it's occurring internally and we don't see it displayed on tooltips. I, as of the moment I am recording this video, cannot find any evidence that this occurred at all in Vanilla WoW, but rest assured I will keep looking and I'll provide my findings on the next Shaman guide I make. This seems like a metric to help scale spells without increasing their ranks. However, my gut feelings is that this is not how things worked in Vanilla WoW, at least not overtly. I think this is probably correct and vanilla-like. However, I think it's worth mentioning as it is a commonly used strategy on private servers by primarily tanks, but it is also very useful while leveling and soloing in the world. Mobs that run away are always annoying. However, on private servers, mobs will always run in the direction their back is facing, allowing you to carefully strategize your pulls, reducing your chances of aggroing other mobs. However, on the beta, mobs run in random directions. I actually think this is great because it forces you and your party members to be wary when mobs are about to run and use abilities that slow them down, especially since many mobs seem to run even faster on the beta compared to private servers. On private servers, a projectile type spell like Lightning Bolt or Frostbolt does not put you in combat right away. Instead, you are flagged for combat when the projectile hits the target and not before, allowing you to do some insane gear switching. This is relevant for Shaman tanks on private servers as you can equip spell power gear, cast Lightning Bolt, and then switch back to your tank gear. This allows you to produce maximal threat on pull. However, on the beta, as soon as you finish casting your spell, you are immediately flagged in combat. Again, I think this is good as it makes the game just a tad harder in some circumstances. In parties in the beta, anyone can mark mobs. I'm not entirely sure if this was intended to be a quality of life change, but I'm almost certain it wasn't possible during vanilla. Overall, in most scenarios, I think this is likely a harmless change or perhaps even beneficial as lazy tanks may not want to mark while healers and DPS may appreciate it. However, this opens the door for perhaps less mature players to troll the group, switching marks over and over again. I personally feel that the group leader alone should be allowed to mark mobs and players in group settings. Thankfully, this is not possible to do in raids unless you are assist or the raid leader. Finally, there are some bugs that have not yet been rectified as of the day this video has been uploaded. I have reported these bugs, or what I perceive to be bugs, multiple times, however, they have not yet been fixed. Most of these are Shaman related, and I will be further analyzing them as I continue to perform tests, but I think they are quite important for the general community to see. Note that this is by no means an exhaustive list, and there are more bugs I've encountered, but to me these are worth mentioning in a video such as this. The first is with Mankirk's wife. Fear not, she is in the right location. On private servers, she does not have a nameplate and a health bar. However, on the beta, if you have nameplates enabled, you can easily spot her, and when clicking on her, she has a full health bar, even though she is obviously dead. I strongly think this is a bug, and I think it should be fixed so she is not so easily spotted. The next issue has to do with Wind Fury weapon. We all know how devastating Wind Fury can be and how awesome it is when it procs. Now on the beta, when it procs, the damage is dealt to the enemy all at once, and is registered in the combat log all at once, as it should be. However, the attack animation and the combat text occur sequentially instead of all at once. I am confident that this is a bug because even if you go back to the original vanilla footage, like in Unbreakable's famous video for instance, you can clearly see the damage shows up graphically all at once. This is also how it works on private servers. However, on the beta, this isn't the case, at least the majority of the time. You'll see the damage showing up sequentially as your character's animation sequentially also occurs. I realize this is perhaps trivial considering that the damage is still working properly as far as the combat log is concerned, but aesthetically it just doesn't feel right. Totems that provide static buffs like Stone Skin Totem and Strength of Earth Totem seem to have different rules depending on when you are gaining the buff or losing it. In this video, you will see me standing next to the totem and I clearly have the Stone Skin buff. Then I will move to some distance out from the totem and lose the buff, which is approximately 20 yards and the distance that it should fall off. However, to regain the buff, I have to get closer than 20 yards to the totem again. It was seen that either the totem is pulsing at weird intervals or there are different radii at which you lose the buff and gain the buff. For reference, this is not how totems work on private servers. There is a static range where the buff falls off and is regained. This likely is working as intended as we look at the tooltip here, but the PvP meta on private servers for so long has been established around grounding totem being destroyed after soaking a single damaging spell. However, on the beta, grounding totem actually can soak up to 5 attacks, as it converts the total damage of the ability to 1. And since grounding totem has 5 hit points, it can therefore soak 5 abilities. However, a soak can only occur once every 10 seconds, so it's actually theoretically impossible to soak more than 4 attacks, considering it has a 45-second duration. This will have some pretty significant effects on the PvP meta if this is actually accurate. However, if you target the totem directly, you can kill it with 1 hit. Well everyone, that about covers it all. I just want to reiterate and make clear, all in all, I am very much enjoying the beta. I think that the game feels right on multiple levels. However, there are some inconsistencies that occur that I am confident Blizzard will rectify. That being said, I would just like to stress that I hope dungeon content will provide a challenge to most of the player base, as challenging content is something that, in my opinion, will improve both the overall quality and the relevant longevity of Classic WoW. I realize that these values, specifically elite mob damage, are likely correct and vanilla-like. However, I do fear that some content, specifically 5-man content where mob levels will be close to player levels, may be trivialized. Fortunately, with the recent news concerning mob parry and dodge scaling, I do believe that raid content will be a bit more challenging than on private servers, and this is excellent news. I, at this time, do not have a solution for the dungeon issue, but would love to hear the voice of the community on this. For any of you lucky enough to be in the beta, do you also feel this way? And has your experience in 5-man content been comparable? I am eager to hear your opinions. Anyway, everyone, I truly believe that WoW Classic will be an overwhelmingly positive experience, regardless of its difficulty, and I will be playing it as much as I possibly can. I will be providing another video if the level cap is increased, or if significant alterations are being made to the beta. Also stay tuned for an updated Advanced Shaman guide where I'll be testing many aspects of the Shaman class and provide updated results where applicable. As always, thank you for watching everyone, keep on keybinding and grinding, and I hope to see you in Classic Azeroth.